You know, I have a PhD thesis. That's not a published document. We had 2 or 3 papers where the old boys corrupt network said, oh, you're an idiot, your samples are contaminated. We're used to this. And of course, my thesis committee saw otherwise when they heard the molecular description. When my papers would go into press before my PhD thesis, they'd say, I didn't believe your last paper either. I mean, that's peer review in our society. And most people just don't understand how things get into journal and how that changes the culture, and how, you know, what I call COVID-19 is propaganda masquerading as science, because there's no science in it.
Let me ask you this, Dr. Judy. By the way, thank you for sharing that. That was very helpful to kind of see the process of going from there to now. So at that time, Dr. Fauci's 45 when he called you with Gallo and you're on the phone with him. Frank at that time is in his early 30s. Is that a pretty accurate statement?
No, Frank's almost his same age.
Frank's the same age as Dr. Fauci.
Correct.
Okay. And then how old are you at that time?
25.
When you were 25?
Yeah.
25. Okay. So this is taking place. And for someone that doesn't know, is not in that world, how big of a deal is it for Gallo and Fauci to say, no, you know, let us look at the paper. Frank eventually gives it to Gallo. They rewrite it. And then they say, we came up with it first. And then they get the patent. When you say they get the patent and they can brag about it, what does this mean in your world? Both respect-wise, both written about, both money-wise, economically. What does it mean when you say they got the patent and they got the credit for it?
Well, it means everything, because then you get things like the Lasker Award, then you get, you know, then you get positions, then your laboratory gets funded, then you can do much more work. It means everything from the standpoint of, you know, everything that comes after that, you're given the credit for other people's work, and you didn't participate at all. You basically stole it. But in the world view, you know, the U.S. tends to say, oh, the French, they don't know anything. We discovered it first. We're the U.S. in medicine. And taking the, you know, Luc Montagnier and Francois did the work. They recognized the patients. That's the most important thing. Find the patients, know what you're looking at. And then, you know, it's our job to know how to grow viruses. That's what Frank did. That's what I learned to do from the time I was 25. And so it's everything. And so you don't get funding if you don't publish in science. You don't get awards.
Got it.
Money, everything.
So that helps get even more funding once you can show that you have all these patents. And by the way, is that when 6 months later he got promoted to being the director? Is that when he got the promotion or no?
Correct. That's when he got the promotion.
So 6 months later, he got the promotion. He's had it ever since.
Correct.
And what kind of power does that give Dr. Fauci? So once you become the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, what kind of influence does he have at that time?
Well, at that time, given HIV/AIDS, it's the biggest thing in our country and our world as far as an infectious disease, because we don't really have infectious disease issues. HTLV1, the leukemia-causing virus, was very rare in our country. It was endemic in Japan. And so quickly we shut that down with protective measures. Don't breastfeed too long. Don't transmit through blood. There are ways to prevent the spreads of retroviruses, which weren't done in the case of HIV. And I will always argue is because it was intended to get rid of those people, and you know, kill a specific population. And there's no evidence to say that isn't what was happening. And that's what Charles Ortleb was writing about. And the reason I wrote his name down is because I asked Frank a few weeks ago, and he said, yeah, I used to edit his newspaper to make sure it was scientifically correct. So, and it had to do right then. And I didn't know until a couple of weeks ago, it was not just AIDS, but it was CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome. So these two always were retroviruses, and they knew it. And they literally, what was worse than being tired? What is the stigma? Chronic fatigue syndrome. And Bobby wrote it really well. And it's usually women. So now here's a population, and what they wrote, and I didn't know this, and he did the research on his own for the forward. I never saw it. And Bobby went back to the newspapers, and here's women who just couldn't handle the stress of big business. Just stay out. You can't play with the old boys. You're fatigued. You're bedridden. You're lazy. You know, what is this? You know, and it's the bias put on a people and a stigma. This shouldn't have been the name. The name of the disease is myalgic encephalomyelitis. Sorry about that. It means inflammation of the brain and spinal cord. And so instead of a scientific disease, they made it, you're crazy, you're not sick, you're just lazy. And in a world where at the time, again, I'm running marathons and riding centuries on my bike, the worst thing in the world was to be lazy and tired.